In the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verses 32 through 33, the 10 faithless spies claimed that they had encountered giants in the land of Canaan. The Nephilim, giants first mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, were demigods that were produced by divine beings mating with human women. So what were these giants in Canaan? Were they simply above average height humans, or were they something much, much worse? In this episode, we're going to try to answer that question. Here we go. In our last episode, we discussed the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6. We determined that they were the offspring of divine beings and human women. They were demigods. With that in mind, we can turn our attention back to the giants of Canaan. What were they exactly? Let's start by reading the text that this whole discussion hinges upon. Numbers chapter 13, verses 32 through 33. In the Christian Standard Bible translation, it reads, "So the 10 faithless spies gave a negative report to the Israelites about the land that they had scouted. They said, 'The land we passed through to explore is one that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it were men of great size. We even saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. To ourselves we seemed like grasshoppers, and we must have seemed the same to them.'" So the spies seem to make a couple of claims here. First, they said that they saw giants, and second, they said that they saw the Nephilim because they saw the sons of Anak, or the Anakim. Let's address each of these claims in turn and see where that lands us. First up, were there giants in Canaan? Yes. We already covered this in the Reconstructing the Giants episode. We have reason to believe that specific individuals like Goliath and Og were unnaturally tall. Goliath has measurements ranging from 6 foot 6 inches to 9 feet 9 inches tall, depending on which ancient manuscript you go by. The older Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls agree on the 6 foot 6 number, and the later Masoretic text has the 9 foot 9 inch number. The Masoretic text, though, has a tendency to demythologize the text, such as its omissions of the title Sons of God or Angels of God from a number of passages. It would be very odd for the writers of the Masoretic text to reverse this tendency and instead exaggerate Goliath's stature. It's therefore possible that the taller height of the Masoretic text is older than the Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls tradition, but we just don't have manuscript evidence for that older tradition just yet. And beyond that, we discussed that his armor and equipment indicate someone much taller than 6 foot 6 inches. Or at least someone who was inhumanly strong even at 6 foot 6 inches. So regardless of his stature, Goliath was either superhuman or he was other than human. Then we discussed King Og of Bashan. We said that his bed was about 13.5 feet long. Assuming that this was proportional to him and that his bed was built along the lines of modern beds proportion-wise, we decided that he might have been somewhere between 12.5 to 13 feet in height. Those measurements are not certain, of course, but the text's inclusion of the dimensions of his bed at all seems to indicate that the author wanted us to imagine something significant about him based upon the dimensions of his bed. I think the best candidate for what they wanted us to imagine was his stature. But even beyond the discussion of Goliath or King Og, we have other passages that describe people of remarkable stature in the land of Canaan. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 2, verses 10 through 11, and in verses 20 through 21, the author compares some formerly powerful giant groups, specifically the Emim and the Zamzummim, to the Anakim, the sons of Anak. The author calls these tribes great and numerous peoples, tall as the Anakim. So the author of Deuteronomy claims that the Anakim themselves were unusually tall, and they claim that there were other people groups in the nearby regions like the Anakim. So, were there giants in Canaan? Yes. Were the Anakim in particular giants? Again, all signs seem to point to yes. That part of what the spies said seems to have been true. Now let's evaluate that second claim, where the spies said that they saw the Nephilim, apparently because they had seen the sons of Anak, or the Anakim. Is this claim true? Probably. Some interpreters dispute this claim, saying that the 10 faithless spies were spinning a tall tale meant to instill fear in the Israelite people. I disagree with this interpretation for a couple of reasons. First, nobody in the text ever countered this part of their story. When Joshua and Caleb countered their companions' negative report, they didn't say, "No, all the Nephilim died in the flood. We know this. There can't be any Nephilim left." They didn't say that. Instead, in Numbers chapter 14, verses 6 through 9, Joshua and Caleb encouraged the people that the land was in fact good and that they could take the land because God was with them. The only thing that they corrected was the part of the bad report that said that the land devours its inhabitants. Joshua and Caleb said that the land was an extremely good land. They did not say there were no Nephilim when they were given the perfect opportunity to say so. Second, I think that they really did see Nephilim because someone seems to have added an explanatory note to the faithless spies report. Here's what I mean. Let's compare my preferred English translation, the Christian Standard Bible, to the Septuagint. The CSB's translation of Numbers 13:33 says this: "We even saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. To ourselves we seemed like grasshoppers, and we must have seemed the same to them." So the CSB renders the text like the spies themselves connected the Anakim to the Nephilim. Now, here's the Septuagint as translated from Greek into English by ChatGPT. It says, "And there we saw the giants, and we were before them like locusts, and so we were in their sight." The Septuagint always translated the Hebrew term Nephilim simply as giants. So if we reverse that decision, this passage would read, "And there we saw the Nephilim, and we were before them like locusts, and so we were in their sight." So the Septuagint, which is an older manuscript, as we said earlier, completely lacks this little extra note that connects the Anakim to the Nephilim. In the Septuagint's rendering, the spies simply said that they saw Nephilim in Canaan. The part that says, quote, "the Anakim came from the Nephilim," was therefore likely a later addition made by one of the editors of the Masoretic text to help people make the connection between the Nephilim and the sons of Anak. Scholars call this kind of explanatory insert a gloss, and this actually makes a lot of sense. It seems very odd for the spies to say, "We saw the sons of Anak," in part of their report up in verse 28 of chapter 13, without any preamble or explanation or connecting them to the Nephilim at all, and then to say later in verse 33, "We saw the Nephilim," and then in the middle of their explanation interrupt themselves to give a history lesson and explain that the Anakim they didn't explain earlier in fact descended from the Nephilim. The lack of a gloss in older manuscripts may indicate that the original audience already knew that the Anakim were Nephilim. So when the spies initially said that they saw the sons of Anak, everybody knew that they meant Nephilim. And when they later said, "We saw the Nephilim," everyone knew that they were referring to the sons of Anak. In fact, Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 2 seems to indicate that the sons of Anak already had a reputation. Moses says that the Israelites know about the Anakim and that you've heard it said about them, "Who can stand up to the sons of Anak?" Presumably, their fearsome heritage could have also been part of that reputation. So it makes sense for this gloss to be added to help later readers know this connection and explain the interchangeability between the Nephilim and the sons of Anak in the passage. The Jewish Publication Society translation makes all of this very explicit. It translates verse 33 like this: "We saw the Nephilim there, M-. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, M-. And we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them." So the gloss is offset in the translation with M dashes, indicating a parenthetical statement that's present for explanation, but not part of the spoken claim. And it straight up says, "The Anakim are Nephilim," in that parenthetical statement. Beyond the JPS translation, the NIV, the NASB, the NKJV, and the ESV also all set this gloss separately in parentheses. I think that this is how we should translate and understand this passage, contra the CSB. So, the spies simply said that they saw the Nephilim, by which everyone in Israel knew that they meant the sons of Anak, or the Anakim/Anakites. The Masoretic text just adds the helpful tidbit, "Dear reader, they're talking about the Anakim they mentioned earlier because everyone knew that they were descended from the Nephilim. The Anakim were Nephilim." So that's who the giants of Canaan were. They were Nephilim. And this means that they were unauthorized beings, just like the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6. But if that's true, then where did this group of Nephilim come from? And if there were Nephilim living after the flood, are shadows of the Nephilim still with us today in our genome? We'll address these questions and more in our next episode. Catch you next time.